Hello and welcome. Rent in Accra. And I'm sure just by saying that, you just cause the panic because your rent may be due. You've probably had a text message from your landlord or wherever it is that you're renting. But this is one issue which I don't think should just be left by chance and just hope that it will just solve itself out. I think there should be stringent policies and checks to make sure we don't price ourselves out of the competition. Once upon a time when Nestle, had an issue and wanted to move to Ghana, they couldn't find enough accommodation. And the ones they could find was just astronomical in terms of rent. But that was the upper end of renting. Now you come to the lower end of renting and people just build their houses, fill it with as many rooms as possible, no sanitary facilities whatsoever, and just get people in to rent. And you need to pay what? 2 years in advance is sort of like the minimum, 2 years in advance. Even though the law clearly states it's illegal, who dare you go and tell your landlord that it's illegal? Well, off your bike, go and find somewhere else to rent. But guys, where we are in a city or in a country where only the urban areas are developing, so wherever you live in your little village, if you are in Adumasa, you finish school, you need to make your way down to an urban area. And when you come, some of the squalors that people are living in, quote and unquote, as residents, is just serious. And I think we shouldn't leave or turn a blind eye to it. My name is Nana Ansakwa, and also your host. When I come back, I'm talking to one of my colleagues who's done extensive work in this area. Don't move. Well, thank you very much for staying. With me in studio is my own brother and journalist colleague, Raymond Aqua. Raymond, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Except Joan Bantams. Anybody who comes on the show the first time gets fined. But Raymond is my brother, so I can't find him. But let's just watch this insert, Shelter Struggle, to set off the conversation. We got it?
Housing is one of Ghana's biggest development challenges. Ghana's housing deficit stands at 1.7 million, according to the Ghana Real Estate Developers Association. More than 15,000 housing units must be built each year for the next 10 years to deal with the problem. But with no strict policy to regulate the sector, the housing challenge continues to worsen, especially for low-income earning urban dwellers. In some parts of Accra, almost unimaginable affluence can be found side by side with nearly unthinkable poverty, a clear evidence of a gaping chasm between the rich and poor. This grim reality appears not to have eluded the two major political parties in Ghana, the NDC and the MPP. Hence, the two parties in the last 2 decades have come up with varied proposals in their manifestos in a bid to solve the country's accommodation deficit. For instance, the opposition MPP in their 2012 manifesto promised to build affordable housing units for rent across the country in partnership with Greda. The housing agency will support the provision of affordable housing for Ghanaians eager to buy their own homes. Non-profit community-based housing development will be encouraged based on successful models in other countries. The governing NDC, on the other hand, promised to promote brick and tile manufacturing using the opportunity offered by the availability of natural gas offshore Ghana, support the use of pozzolana cement in the construction of both public and private housing units, set up standards for engineering infrastructure covering road designs, electricity, water, telephones, and fire hydrants to suit all communities and income groups. However, For some Ghanaians, both governments have done very little if you consider what they promised on paper. Nothing, perhaps, really depicts the country's housing problem more graphically than finding teenagers sleeping on the streets. 19 people live in this house. They share the same bath but have no toilet, a common reality in many old homes in Accra. Lydia has been living here for almost 5 years.
Oh, a higher part of extent is a bit matching with the honor we yemini idea no. And we a problem, Cassiapa. Inti Yama got I die in Nemuno, a man for to toilet in the idea gum instead of toilet in a so bang.
The lack of toilets in this house is a big problem for us. For instance, if you are suffering from a stomach upset at dawn, that can be a trying moment for you if you live in this house. People continue to dump fecal matter in the gutter in front of this house due to the lack of toilets here. There's a public toilet close by, but they keep dumping it in the gutter. And even at the public toilet, they don't keep the place tidy, so I always feel uncomfortable using it. In spite of this, finding a room in Nodoko can be a mountainous task. You can only get a room through an agent, and most of them are not trustworthy. They can take your money and spend it without getting a room for you.
So many materials, 700. 70 Ghana. Say 2 years in the Suna me pair, Namasama 2 years.
It's not up to me to determine whether we have done enough or not. It's up to the people of Ghana and the programs that we are putting in place to help reduce the deficits. And so I'm not in a position to say yes or no to what we have done. Through government private partnership arrangements with Angle Resources, we are also doing 10,000 housing units at Amasaman. And again, we have also collaborated with Sati Real Estate to do also 10,000 housing units. They have completed about the 500 units is ready. It's on the market now for sale.
It is very sad that today, as a nation, we have this huge housing deficit and we are not doing much about it. People continue to get married and continue to produce children, and our population continue to increase. Housing for the people is not going to stop. It's not a project where you call a contractor, give him a project, and he executes 1,000 houses, and then he walks away, and you think you have done something.
The reality of our time. Housing. But with me in the studio, as I introduced him earlier, Raymond Aqua, who's a journalist of our own from here, Multimedia. Raymond, first of all, what triggered this story?
Okay, so I mean, going back to in the run-up to the previous, what they call election 2012, housing was such a big discussion. It was also because there was so much talk about how are you going to accommodate the next generation. The discussion pretty much moved into that percentage of the population that's youthful, that has very little in terms of resources, and that needs to be accommodated. The links between housing and criminal activities, the links between housing and education, and even health of the population were all drawn in. We have 6 months again to another election. There is not so much being said about housing as we speak now. Unfortunately, we still have a huge youth bulge. We still have a population that most of them are still below the income range that can make them afford the kind of housing that we are putting up in most of our urban areas. Most of the people in this country are now living in urban areas now, more than half of the population. So it's a discussion that's supposed to be had because we are sitting on a time bomb. We are just rolling up to the time where many people will now have to find other means of not only living on the streets, but trying to get themselves accommodation, which will become too much for the state to bear. If we do not solve the problem now, the next 5 years coming, there will be close to 2.5 million housing units we will need to solve the problem. 4 years before, we needed 1.7 million. Now we need more than 2 million. In the next 4 years, it's going to be 2.5 million. It keeps doubling by the years because you are not solving the problem. And we are having more children, a population that's currently and consistently on the rise. This is the time bomb. That is why, ahead of this year's election, I mean, to bring into perspective, we need to make sure at least there's real commitment, not just in manifestos, but by any government coming or going, to deal with this situation once and for all.
I mean, why is there not, this low-income housing has, we've gone on and on and on and on, but all the houses you see are the multi-million ones coming out in the cantonments and the airports, and those ones are just springing up on a daily basis. But the affordable, quote unquote, whatever affordable means, they don't seem to turn up.
The standard definition for what's supposed to be affordable housing is when you spend 30% of your income on rent or any form of housing unit you own. Most Ghanaians cannot, as we speak, spend 30% of their income on the right kind of housing that are being provided in this country. So on one hand, there's high-end housing being provided. On the other hand, there are people who do not have the resources for this kind of housing. It also beats anybody's imagination, even for business people. Why do you keep on producing houses people cannot live in? So who are the real customers in this case? Who are the people who are supposed to fill in? When you know you are alienating close to 80% of the population in the kind of houses, even by government, and what it calls affordable. So that is where the huge difference is. They have made complaints about the building materials, the cost of putting up these houses. But the alternative thought was, if indeed you wanted to make up for space, you wanted to look local materials, and if you watch the NDC's manifesto in 2012, the reason for pushing pozzolana, because we all thought it was going to be cheaper, environmentally friendly, and all of the good things that such a cement can bring on board. If cement is such an important part of the cost build-up for any building project, why didn't we push it within the last 4 years? Why are we still using the same materials to build the same kind of houses, which is out of reach to the majority of the people? That is the question.
Could it be, maybe we don't complain enough. You see, the people who are really suffering, I mean, they're the same people who queue up and and therefore, if you're still jumping up and down and ready to queue up and vote for me, maybe I won't concern myself so much in your accommodation because you yourself, haven't worried so much. I mean, could that be that the outcry hasn't been much?
It's a factor. But if you also consider the fact that the Rent Control Department receives close to 30,000 complaints every year. These are people who feel offended one way or the other. It could be tenants, it could be landlord, who are just going in there because they have difficulties with how their current accommodation situation is being dealt with. It means people are complaining. But perhaps their complaints are in making sure that their current situation is improved, but not to fixing the general problem. And very little media coverage, for instance, is the big deal. Since 2012, I've been counting them. It's 197, if you take the major newspapers in the country, since 2012, 197 reports on accommodation in any form. Most of these reports are also in the form of government projects that are supposed to be started, that may be started, that there is an intention to start.
Hanging in the balance.
None saying that this is the number completed or this is the real issue that needs to be dealt with. So just about 5% of the real reports in this country concentrate on the problem of housing, which is a big deal. Even that not all. We all know Maslow's theory of needs. Housing is a major component of that particular need every human being needs. So if a state exists for the people to solve their problems, would it not be reasonable that one of the major issues you would want to solve first is shelter?
1.7 million heading to 2.5 million. I wonder who would be brave enough to mount a platform and say, when I come, I will solve this issue. And let's wait and see who's going to be brave enough. But the 0560 800 000, I mean, accommodation cuts across. We're all affected one way or the other. So I want to hear your take on that. 0560 800 000. And I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, let's find out who's going to be brave enough to even tackle this. Wow, wow, wow. Isn't that scary? And we are not even talking about it, planning or even thinking about it. We're just carrying on business as usual. The Minister for Interior, Mark Mayongo, then was sat here, and I remember I put this same question to him that is a time bomb waiting to explode, and he said yes, that one day it will explode. Even though they didn't actually know when, they knew it will explode. But you've been out there. I mean, what's the frustration on the ground, or what sense do you get?
Take a small housing unit. That's like a makeshift place for people in Abobloshi. 12 people live in that particular room, a very small room. It's like a kiosk. And sometimes, if it rains, even though you've paid for the place, you cannot displace somebody who's actually come in as an emergency to find shelter. These people, assuming that one person has cholera, they can all be easily infected with cholera. These people also may be working for you in diverse ways. They may be helping you in your home, and they'll bring the cholera to your home. Professor Jacobson Sorry and Sebastian K. Avile actually did a book around why cholera spreads in Accra, and they actually situated around the Odona, right from the lagoon. The settlements around this place alone can be a major cause of spread. So it takes only 5 people having cholera, and because of the space they live in, and this is just cholera, there are other infectious diseases that when people are in such spaces, they actually get to live in. And for a 12 people small place, they are paying like 10 cedi every night.
Really?
Yes.
Like a bed and breakfast?
Yes. So, but, I mean, you're not even guaranteed the space, because sometimes you may have to share. And for the young ladies and other things, the threats in being raped or being subjected to all of the abuses are also very rife. So you're talking about real people in the capital city of Accra. And so we are clear on that. It's not only Abobloshi that has a problem with
what are the numbers now?
So we are looking at some 5.8 million. That is according to, yes, who are living in slum areas.
Who are a quarter of the nation.
Yes. That are living in specific places that are not supposed to be inhabited by human beings.
5 million and above.
Yes. And that 5 million is around the same number of young people in the country. Wow. So, I mean, we are talking really about human beings who are being compelled by circumstances to live in conditions that only makes them worse, actually exposes them to disease, exposes them to all the crimes, exposes them to all the dangers that has to be in a country of this sort. So when we put all of this together, it only comes to one point, that if a child is born today in Abobloshi, that child may have to go through the same process, may be raped or at age 12 and also have his own child or anything like that, live in the same condition. This child may get some form of education if the person is guaranteed, or continue in the vicious cycle of poverty. Then we compare the same human resource to those elsewhere. We are not training any new ones, but we are using an environment that's unfriendly, that's by UN standards not good enough to actually breed a new set of people into this world who are not in any way going to be better off. So there are linkages with all the other sectors of life, I mean, to health, to education, to every other important thing that needs to be done. And the practice is in an office of inhumane. Right to shelter is a fundamental human right. But it's because, I mean, moving out of even the slums, it's because you have a big problem. People exploit the situation. You certainly will have people now struggling to pay amounts, and sometimes even people who are working would have to look for loan. Assuming your rent is 3 times the amount of money you're supposed to be earning minimum wage. What you have to do is that you need loan to pay up to the 2 years. Yeah. When you have to pay up to the 2 years, by the time you finish the 2 years, you have just finished paying the previous loan. So you may just need another loan. this person may have to become a father along the line, provide for a family, cater for a small unit, and actually make sure that they're also well fed and all of that. That person may be perpetually dependent on a bank that is charging high interest for the person to get a place to put their head. All the other things to do with utility and other things do not come in at this point in time. So it is a bigger cost, not only to your cost of living, but also to the family, the small unit called family, that any state would want to protect so that you are deemed to be doing the things that you ought to do right. So that is how it spirals into a national problem. And much of this also occurs on the larger scale because if this is happening in a small family and others are also living so, don't forget, people do not choose on their own to live in urban areas in countries like Ghana because they have to be forced in there.
Yeah.
The push factors are actually higher than the pull factors. They are pushed away from where they are because there are no opportunities. The thinking is that they will have opportunities in places like Accra, Kumasi, and all that they have to do in the instance is to spend all their life earnings on accommodation alone, and they will get back nothing. So it's no way of improving the lives of people. It's no way of making sure that even their current circumstances are better off. And it's no way of making sure that systems that are supposed to work and even national data is improved in any way. So it's not surprising that the areas of health, the areas of what they call it, sanitation, the areas of the environment are the areas we perform poorly when we were viewed under the MDGs. It's because all of these are related to how the human being has to survive and what conditions is the human being living. And these are the deplorable ones we have.
I mean, building outside of cities, probably setting up factories or setting up work opportunities outside of Accra. I mean, how much of that will, ease this problem?
Okay, so if we had a proper planning system, that said that for every important community, we identify the good pole and build such a structure that if share nut industry is required in this particular community, there is evidence also to suggest that you reduce migration within the same country. People will not be willing to move, especially if they are only moving because they need opportunities. They will not be willing to go. So if we're able to build the right group posts, like the real intent behind SADA, for instance, was, I heard Dr. Sule Gariba say that consistently, that we want to make sure that we build good posts so that people will not be compelled to look for the same opportunities down south and be forced to live in conditions that are deplorable. So if we're able to do these things, we will keep people in the communities because people are more comfortable where they actually want to be. When they have the right conditions, they would want to stay there. But they can only move if there are pull factors, like, for example, the person is married and have to move in with the family and all of that. But if the only reason why they are moving is to survive, then you see the numbers. Then see they have to live in conditions that are not good enough. So it is interlocked with how you build industries, specific areas of development in communities, in especially a country that have a wide north-south divide. Not long ago, UNICEF stressed the point that we knew all this while. Ghana's poverty report has even stressed it consistently. Between 92 and 2006, we halved poverty in Ghana, but we increased poverty in a section of the country. That is the 3 regions of the north. So whilst we drew close to half of the population out of poverty, it was only in southern Ghana, predominantly. In northern Ghana, 900,000 Ghanaians slipped down into poverty around the same time. These are people who look for opportunities, or their descendants would want to look for opportunities. That is why we can't bridge the gap. That is why we're also not providing the right accommodation and housing plan. If you did hear, there were discussions as to whether or not the people who are involved in domestic chores and casual work, like I needed specific housing units to help them cope. That was tackling the problem from the end result and not from the root of it. They are better off having wonderful opportunities wherever the person comes from and let the person choose that I'm properly educated, I know my left from right, I have income that I can be sustained on, I can hold a family on. So if I'm moving to a place that I can be properly taken care of. Not because they have nothing and they have to survive on these. So it is the discussion that's one poorly diagnosed, because the politicians mostly want to look at the quick fixes. So every year we are told they are starting new projects. If like check, and it dates back to the 90s, it is clear that post-structural adjustment programs, we've not been strong enough in ensuring that the state's role in not only providing an efficient environment for the development of housing units, but also being an active participant in that particular sector, because it's a basic need, has been done properly. So we were not able to do that because we were told that we needed to stay out of certain areas, let the private sector control it boldly, but we know that the private sector comes with market-driven effects, and the market determines what's supposed to be the price. And in reality, if there's so much demand and very little supply, no rational businessman is going to go for it at a cheaper rate. The businessman has no responsibility to the state to keep it at a low end. Somebody who's voted for with a collective conscience, as John Locke says in the social contract, somebody who has a responsibility to take care of people because they ceded their autonomy and to some extent their control to the person and pay taxes to, has to step in, provide not only the conditions, but when there's a need, just as we do with social interventions, provide the necessary intervention to make sure the problem is at least solved. So if we're able to clear deficits, backlog, then we can now look forward to saying that let's reform our economy, that people get the money to pay what they want to pay, and also make sure we take care of the very poor in society in this case.
Backlog and moving forward. We're doing what, 3,000 units a year nationally?
Yeah. Interesting. We are actually doing close to, that's if you take government estimation serious, close to 15,000.
A year?
Yes.
And we need to be doing what, 170?
We should be doing between 150 and 170 each year if we really want to make the necessary impact. So if you want, that's the
government
backlog,
we're doing not 15,000.
Well, if you look at the estimations, that's how they make it. And of course, it's with projects they say, but not necessarily all from government.
No, I mean,
in
private,
reality, private and
public,
and we're doing close to 15,000 every year. But that is like a drop in the ocean compared to what we really need to make up the shortfall we have so far. But the danger is that we will continue actually having more shortfall if we don't meet it now. If we don't clear backlog, we will be piling on, and we don't know. Houses not spring up overnight.
Did you take population growth, teenage pregnancy into account in this ratio?
Brilliant. When you take all of that into that's an estimation that goes into a very wild one. So we're looking at close to 200,000 units if we want to be very much inclusive in all of the factors. Not necessarily looking at the average growth rate of 1.2% and all of that percentages that we use for our population growth since the 2010 population and housing census. So that's pushing it to like about 200,000 units every single year. We cannot, and we've not been able to do up to, even if you still want to consider that, up to 20,000 every single year. So we are not able to do about 10%.
And I'm telling you, that figure is very questionable. This 20,000, this, that. Look, you see all these, because I did a little, all these apartments and everything coming up. And, I was asking them. And even though they have...
Who lives in these residences?
They don't, in each company, they finish less than 20, in a year. They can actually complete like less than 20 in a year. These are all the big boys, who are developing. They rarely ever finish them. So I wonder where this...
So if you step it down, if you step it down and be less considerate to what government considers to be its appropriate data, if you step it down, you're still looking at we're not being able to make up to even 10% of what's required.
And the population is growing.
Yes, population is actually growing, doubling at a rate that it's pretty much more youthful. That's even what the danger is. Youthful, active, very, very fertile, and our fertility rate is not getting any better. We'll be hovering around 3.94% for a very long time. So, it presumes that people want to have 4 children. so even providing a single bedroom for somebody whose average range, the singlet mean average for marriages and people's intent to have children, it's within 3 to 4. So that even ought to fit into the kind of housing we are providing. But that is not being done. So we are going a very long way without solving the problem.
Is it ironical that those at the bottom of the ladder have more kids?
Yes, but there are several factors for that. For example, if the person is less educated, there is enough evidence to suggest that the more educated the person is, the higher the tendency the person may not have more children. In fact, the original conception of education was also to keep people in school to a period that they are in the right frame of mind to make the right decisions on the number of children, and also on even the need to actually engage the other sex. So that mattered a lot. But we are still talking about a huge section of our population that cannot go beyond basic education. So that is where the problem also is. If they can't go beyond basic education, their earnings within that scope is limited. We are even in this country talking about graduate unemployment. And we see it's a big problem, and also call it another time bomb. The guy is unemployed. The guy who even went up to being a graduate is unemployed. How about the guy who could not get a certificate from even the basic level? Those people will all pile up the numbers, making it very difficult for you to provide the kind of housing you need to provide for these people at all the levels that you need to do. And we've not really changed our attitude about family planning so well.
Let me catch up with some of the messages of our viewers. Now, how can the Deputy Minister describe houses being sold by Sethi as affordable? How many Ghanaian homes can afford a 2-bedroom apartment at $50,000 US? If people are going to pay for these houses over a number of years, it could make sense. Ernest in Takrade sends that. This one says, good evening, add your name. Good evening. When would they start the ID registration? You should have added it. Even social security houses, which are built by workers' money, how many workers are able to acquire, let alone affordable housing per se, not by reality. You did not add your name to that message. This one says, I saw, don't call this number, please. I saw an advert on TV. The housing, I saw an advert on TV. The houses are sold at 300,000 Ghana, and it says affordable. I asked myself, how many Ghanaian can buy such houses? This is Peter in Takrade. 300,000 affordable houses. I've been working for 6 years now, and I've spent all my savings on rent advance. My current landlord refused to accept 1 year advance, so I have no option than to pay. Meanwhile, I've been thrown out of my former place because I couldn't pay 2 years advance. So I had to go in for a loan. May God help us. Vincent in OEB, and that's some of the realities out there. 0560 800 000, 0560 800 000. Send your messages in, and I will catch up with you. Raymond, why is the media not interested in such big story?
I don't think it's the lack of interest. I think that the flow of news is sometimes too fluid, that some of these issues require time to work with. They require energy to actually deeply search and do the real life stories of people who are suffering and all of that. It doesn't catch on quickly that if you are into doing the quick stories about who is beating who is refusing to register where, and what the political parties are saying, it doesn't get the kind of attention for anybody who wants to sell quickly. But they also forget that your family member, your friend, your relative may be facing a similar problem. So the sooner we all resolve it for our good, the better the situation will be for everybody. So we need to refocus it. And it's not only to do with housing. I think the essentials of society, housing, education, food, and all the basics are sometimes pushed to the back burner in the name of a political partisan season that requires a lot of the big feeling about what political party A is saying and what political party B is saying. There's nothing wrong with doing partisan politics, when especially you are getting the politicians to tell you exactly how they are going to resolve the current housing deficit properly.
You think the electorate will be informed enough this year to say, hey, hold on. you calling for change left, right, and center. What are you going to change in accommodation? You think, maybe, let me rephrase it, do you think we can educate them enough in this 6 months to get them to be aware that, listen, this is something that will come and bite us, or what are you doing about it?
We can. One of the things that happened in the previous campaign period was that there was even a lot of slogans drafted around education. It means that when the issue is pushed and consistently pushed, politicians will have to respond to the tide. And when the people make it clear to them that the stakes have changed, and now we are no longer going to accept small money or going to be influenced by you telling me that I have to vote for you because of where I'm from, so that some foreign writer will say that in our part of the world, our elections are ethnic census. If we make it known to the people that there's so much at stake that they can't use divisive means to get your votes, and that you are insisting that so far as it comes to elections this year, if you have proof of your competence in solving this and that problem, you get my vote. If the voter population drifts towards that direction, then there is good news. There's also slight good news when you are getting more people getting interested. Because when people really are frustrated about where to live, it gets to them. They feel it. And when these issues compile and compress people for a very long time, they would want answers to them. Luckily, the space will be through the media. So they want to use the media as their voice. The other way around is mostly difficult because, well, I mean, they think that the politicians are doing them a favor. The idea of the rent-seeking politician, the guy whose competence is because he says he has a will to rule over you and demands that through that process, would not want real discussions on the most important issues because he knows that you may want to hold them to it. I've read several research documents, some of them surprising to me, that stipulates that even just today, the CDD's report is indicating that some Ghanaians are saying that they are looking at their own interest. I was happy with that. If only your own interest was pursuing your housing issues, your education issues, the food you eat, the health that you need, if your own interest is pursuing these ones, I think you are pursuing national interest indirectly.
But obviously, the interest is just, you know, a little cash.
Taking the pittance, because they be made to believe that it's how best you can keep people. There is this, of course, it's a theory that's conspiratorial. The conspiracy in this case is that in our part of the world, it is the politicians' great interest to keep you uneducated on the most important things.
It's a big debate, and I think I need to get you to do. Let me catch up with just a message, take a quick break and come back and continue, because when I come back, my question is that, are people so poor or so ignorant to be unaware of their right and their circumstances? So hold on to that question. But this one says, good evening, Nana. The issue of rent in Accra and by extension housing in general is one of a nightmare. This has been compounded further by the inability of successive governments to fulfill their manifesto pledges. Although the rent control unit has been inundated with several rent-related problems, making it practically impossible to meet the needs of most vulnerable families, I reckon they must do more in enforcing the laws that give protection to the tenant from the unwarranted extortion from landlords. For the medium to long term, government should refrain from the usual political rhetoric and rather demonstrate strong commitment in completing existing affordable housing projects nationwide, and should also partner with real estate companies to find a viable and feasible route in bridging the widening housing deficit. This is from Jacob. We're coming straight back. Are we too poor and ignorant to even realize our own plight? Don't go. Well, thank you very much for staying. And the nation's heartbeat, the Ghana Premier League, shows every Saturday on your leading channel at Doom TV. For all the cheers, tears, suspense, and thrills, don't miss the Never Say Die Accra Hearts of Oak. What team do you support?
Well, I was formerly Kotoko, but I lost interest in the... No, not yet. I was supposed to support Abusian Dwells because I was reminded, but I don't know if it still exists as we're supposed to have it.
Well, so don't miss the Never Say Die Accra Hearts of Oak, Fabulous Kumasi Asante Kotoko. who've lost one fan, the mysterious Abusia dwarves who are about to get one fan, and Sekedi Hazakas and the new kid on the block, Mediama, Liberty Professionals, Brecum Chelsea, Techiman City, Wild Stars, New Odubiasi, and all other Premier Giants on your favorite channel, Adum TV, every Saturday. It's Ghana's Premier League, only on Adum TV. Yeah, well, you don't want to miss that at all. This one says, Nana, your question is a great one. I don't see any of them showing sense of commitment in the housing issue. Maybe Indum is a trial because he has a track record on the ground. But Raymond, I just wanted to find out before the break if we are too poor, too illiterate, too ignorant to even be aware of our plight and demand our right.
I was talking about that particular conspiracy theory that says that if politicians have a tendency, I mean, it's more expensive demanding to buy the votes of an educated person. The stakes are higher. So what you want to do rather is to keep that particular voter population relatively young, inexperienced, and not so much working, and also very poor. And when they have little education, you have to give them very little to influence the vote and buy it when you want to buy it. That theory encapsulates how many people think about votes in our part of the world. It's not really to them about changing their lives or making a decision or controlling the politician because they have the power to do so. They really see it to be one favor he has to do somebody because of an ethnic orientation, because of some form of other orientation as maybe religious and other divisive points that can be explored. But what they forget is that beyond this, the politician is smart enough to know that when I come back to you for a vote because of where we come from, I don't need to do or work much to get that vote. And if it's expensive, they have to work hard to make sure that we all prosper from a bigger national cake than being a smaller one being shared by a few. So,
but I keep, sometimes you're blaming the illiterate, but I just come from radio doing, that's my opinion. And I was, the guys in the university are also sharply divided, one for MPP, one for NDC, and just for that sake, rather than demanding that, listen, I'm supporting you, but what's your proposal on environment? What's your proposal on housing? Sanitation. It's just that, no, I'm just supporting you, whatever it is, I'm supporting you. Really? But these are the echelons of...
Yes, they are educated illiterates. I mean, the concept is still there. They are people, in fact, the right expression, the Latin adage that actually coined an idiot is those who took no proper interest in the affairs of the state. And I dare say, there are people like that even in the highest level of education. They still have the same thinking of people who have not been properly schooled. It could be partly due to the kind of education system we have, but it is up to the critical mass to influence the majority of the people. What I see as a failing of a state of this kind is that the critical mass has not been that active to influence the larger bloc. It always takes a tipping point for a grouping to be influenced. It has never been the case that even with Egypt that had all the, close to 90% of the population were educated. It still took a few people to lead some form of a change. It starts with a few. They influence the masses, and the rippling effect goes along a very long route. I don't think we've gotten there yet, where people would want to see the stakes being very high because of the influence others are having on them. I think there are too many individualistic, very well-educated people in this country who do not see advocacy as a very good point.
But you see, if you went out there today and you hit the road and you were upset with the government because you thought Fadama living conditions were bad, you'd be surprised that the first people who come and beat you be the people from Sadama because they support the government. You are making the government look bad. They are the first person who come and chastise you.
Because we've not worked on the minds of many very well. We've not done the good deal of having to, because really, advocacy is very little to do with the show of bravado or the brute force or the competence to be out there shouting. It starts first and foremost with getting people to understand the stakes and work on it. When they know that they are being taken for granted, when they know that their situation is going bad by the day, when they know that they can bargain for a higher price than just the 10 cedis they get every 4 years, when they know that 10 cedis they buy in 4 years is negligible, they can't do anything with it, that is when they start realizing that. So it starts first and foremost with having people understand what is at stake deep within their minds. And it can actually be out of that particular thinking that they can act. But if all of a sudden, and change takes some time, people are made to look like, is our group you don't know well enough, and you actually have to make sure that you get along, they'll resist the change. But you need to make it gradual in a way that the larger sections of the population will come to now appreciate the stakes through the actions of a few.
Reverend, going forward, what should we do? I mean, well, this is a huge, huge problem. I mean, going forward, what should we do?
First and foremost, I think what can be done, and of course, I mean, we don't lack policy. We have a very nice housing policy. We're also being told that the current Rent Act is being reviewed. We don't lack policy. What we have lacked over the years, which has been talked about consistently, is implementation of these policies and also getting the right laws enforced. If we can get, and of course it's barely 6 months to elections, if we can get those who are vying for public office to not only make commitment as blank and vague as what they put in their previous, what they call it, manifestos, but to make specific commitments that we can hold them by. Tell us that we are going to make sure that we reduce this housing stock each year by this particular number. You have 4 years. How much of the backlog can you clear? Within what period? And what can be done if you don't live by this particular principle or the stance or the policy direction you have given in this way? If we get them to commit to it and we hold them to these particular commitments to the point that they'll be principled enough to say, I promised you that I'll reduce it by this number, I'm unable to do so, and I want to resign because you've shown me that I have failed in doing what I want to do in the social contract I had with you, then we can make it work. So that's where we can start from. People realizing there's a problem. Moving on to make sure that they get people who demand their votes to give them something in return. Commitments that will fix the problem within the earliest possible time with tangible solutions and not the usual way of pretending to work on solutions without necessarily working on them.
The other thing is, you know, my colleague chiefs, I mean, if you drive up, like you're driving up a Buri, and you look down into the plains, I mean, it's like the landscape is changing by the minute, where it's just rows and rows of houses, unplanned, no planned roads, no plan, you know, so even if we decided to have this policy, where is the land space now, you know, to start building? You know, are you going to buy out people and build higher? What's the plan?
Interestingly, we have a land optimization policy.
Wow.
Yeah. The ministry has actually put together a land optimization policy. The understanding there is that, of course, they also realized the same point that, some years back, I was told by Professor Irene Odote that even places like Oyarifa was not inhabited by human beings. It was thick forest for everybody. Now, virtually everybody is occupying the space there. The difference here now is if we already have a land optimization policy, why are we not going by these ones? It is the responsibility of a certain local authority to ensure that the area, and we know what Nkrumah did with Tema, and how over the years it failed and became what it is today. I always use an example. The University of Ghana has never flooded. It has low and high lying areas. Because when they were building the University of Ghana in 1948, some very wise man thought it good to put in storm drains because of how the land slants. But within the same period, that place was properly couched and properly redesigned with deeper storm drains. Outside the University of Ghana, a new set of people who are supposed to plan a new city failed to do that same thing. And that's why we have a deep problem here. For a low-lying area like Accra, it shows that if you have failed to plan, it's not too late. I mean, we can't have the plague that London went through. The Great Fires, we are not going to get them. But we can start with even new settlements, properly planning them, so that if we have a planned area which would use the land optimization policy, then we can go ahead in making sure that we can give people the kind of housing that they need. They work together. Development is always a coordinated, principled approach. It can never be done in isolation and disjointed. It is only when it is to seek cheap political points that you do it in isolation and disjointed.
This one says, Nana, go to Winneba and walk along the street in the evening after 9 p.m. and see where and how people sleep. Housing is a challenge in this country. Funny enough, I never thought of Winneba also had such an issue, you know. Daniel in Atebubu, one way to solve the dangerous problem is exploring the use of our local materials in building by these so-called affordable housing. Have we soon forgotten our own Atakwame Diana? Modernize Atakwame and make it cheaper. Let's think about this. I know somebody did a research on why the ant hill does not dissolve in the rain. And therefore, if you're going to do Atakwame down, use the mechanics that the ant is using for its hill. But as usual, like you're saying, find
even
policies.
The Building Research Institute have actually explored that particular point.
But it's somewhere in the shelf somewhere. But Raymond, thank you so much. But somehow I know this conversation will continue. I indeed want it to continue. I want us to raise the awareness so that we demand that going forward, this issue is solved once and for all. And it's one of the issues that has to be solved very wide. Ministry of Health has to come in there to reduce the birth control. Education has to come in there to increase education. The planners have to get in and plan. The builders have to get in and build. And the media houses have to offer their platform for more education. And Raymond, thumbs up for this, and I'm sure something good will come out of it. And if you want any of my nice shirts that I've been wearing on the show, just get your pen and write down this number, 024 366 2001. 024 366 2001. Give Tanti's a call and order yourself one shirt. Thank you very much, my brother. And to you at home, thank you for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Good job.
PM Express was brought to you by
Guarantee Trust Bank. Wouldn't you rather bank with us?